which is a Ramey recorded map modification. Staff is ready for that item, so I'd recommend that we do move forward with the Ramey recorded map modification now, and then we will just do the appeal of Canarillos as the third item.
Okay. Very good. Mr. Villalobos, could you read item 2 into the record, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Following is a hearing on the request of Robert Ramey, property owner, to consider case number 19RMM3, application filed on October 22nd, 2019, and to determine that the project is exempt from CEQA pursuant to section 15270 of the state guidelines for implementation of the California Environmental Quality Act.
Thank you, Mr. Villalobos. I have no ex parte or site visits to report. Do any of my fellow commissioners have anything they would like to report?
Oh, sorry.
Commissioner Bradley.
Sorry, I spent some time with the applicant and some months ago when it was first on the agenda, and I spoke briefly with Mark de la Garza yesterday, but almost in passing, so no other disclosures.
Thank you, Commissioner Bradley. Okay, let's move on to the staff report.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Willow Brown. I will be presenting the proposal for the Ramey recorded map modification.
Are we seeing her?
Not
just
yet.
give us one moment. We're just trying to get the slides pulled up on the screen.
Thank you.
The project site is located at 820 Cathedral Vista Lane in the Eastern Goleta Valley Community Plan. The applicant is proposing to strike condition 15 of the parcel map's conditions of approval, which is that no development shall be permitted outside of the building envelope unless it is for access and fencing. At the PC hearing of August 26, 2020, the Commission recommended that the applicant work with staff to identify information required for review of the project and return to the Commission with a biological report, slope stability analysis and slope map, and identification of easements on the property. This image shows the environmentally sensitive habitat and buffer area on the subject parcel. The biological report supports the need for restricting development to the building envelope, as there is environmentally sensitive habitat on the majority of the parcel, and the building envelope would ensure development occurs outside of these areas. This image on the left shows the cross-section where the slope stability analysis was done, and the image on the right shows the fill slopes that were analyzed. The slope stability analysis concluded that the fill slope is not stable as configured, and restricting development to the building envelope would ensure that development does not occur on the steeply sloped area with unstable fill slopes. This image shows the slopes present on the subject parcel. The existing sloped area outside of the building envelope has a maximum slope of approximately 77%. Pursuant to the Eastern Goleta Valley Community Plan, any development on slopes greater than 30% shall not be allowed. The slope map shows that there are still steep slopes on the subject parcel, and restricting development to the building envelope would ensure development does not occur on these steep slopes. The circumstances under which the parcel map was created have not changed. The project is exempt from environmental review pursuant to Section 15270 of CEQA, projects which are disapproved. Staff's recommended actions have not changed since the August 26, 2020 hearing. Therefore, staff recommends that your Commission make the required findings for denial of the project, determine that denial of the project is exempt from CEQA, and deny the project. This concludes staff's presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions your Commission may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Park.
I have some questions of staff. I spent a lot of time out on the site with Mr. Ramey, and then listened carefully to our kind of long substantive hearing we had there. I think Tess Harris was handling the case then, I think. And I've got to confess, my understanding of this matter is going backwards after reading the materials for today. So I just want to clarify some things. The slope stability analysis talks about an intention by Mr. Ramey to extend his yard out into the slope area somehow. And I don't see that intention communicated anywhere else. And I've never heard it from Mr. Ramey. Are you aware of some intention, some project to extend the building site out onto the slope area that's unstable?
Chair and Commissioner Park. So this application came in originally as a land use permit for development on the site as an LUP. And at that point, the planner had recognized that there was a parcel map with a development envelope on this property, and there was development being proposed outside of the envelope. And so it was flagged for the applicant to submit for a recorded map modification if they wanted to pursue that development. So before your commission is, it's a little tricky. It's really just looking at whether we can make the findings for the recorded map modification. But our understanding is that, yes, the applicant, it sounds like the applicant does have an interest in development on the parcel.
But is it development outside the building envelope, or is he actually extending some grading and building and so forth out into the slope area outside the building envelope?
Chair and Commissioners, my understanding is that there is some, and perhaps Mr. Ramey can elaborate, but my understanding was that there was some grading, drainage, perhaps some retaining walls. I'm not positive on that. That would extend outside of the development envelope. And because the language is fairly strict in the condition, that only would allow for driveway access and perimeter fencing or walls. And it specifically says that no development, including grading, shall be permitted. That grading that's proposed outside of the envelope is what flagged the recorded map modification to come in.
Okay. And the slope stability analysis, when it talks about fill 1 and fill 2, which are, they have a lot of, those particular fill areas have a lot of trash and they're unconsolidated and they're really not very appropriate fills. And the slope stability analysis makes that point. Is that the entire slope around the building envelope, or is that just in the east area that's so steep? Do you know?
Commissioner, through the chair, you can see the cross section is taken from like the line where the cross section is taken, and it starts at T1 and goes to T4, and then that's also shown on the right. So T1 is where fill 1 starts, and it goes to, so the building envelope starts at T3, and so that would be the area of the steeply sloped area with the unstable fills.
Just adding on, essentially the area that you see dashed on the screen. If we could get the screen back up in just a moment, but there's an area. Perfect. If you look on the right hand side, there's an area that's dashed in black. My understanding is that's kind of the area of unstable slope. So where you see T3, that's outside of the unstable slope. That's where we understand the development envelope to end. Development envelope is the flat portion, and then the site slopes pretty quickly down, and that's where you see unstable slopes.
Mr. Chair, does staff have a mouse available to trace what Ms. Harris just explained? I think that's very illuminating for all of us, because I think what she was saying is the T3 through T4 area was what she was referring to, and then maybe marry it to the cross sections on the aerial site plan.
I would like to support that request because, I feel like the emperor has no clothes, but I've stated for months, I can't actually see these slides in any detail. So it's just a blur, and you talk about T1 or T3 or a dotted line. All I see is a blur. It's just the way things look on this end. I don't think it's just me. So I kind of need a more verbal description, or like Commissioner Bradley said.
Okay, so looks like if you can you see the red dot, Commissioner Park?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
So let's go through that explanation one more time, if you could, Ms. Harris, or
Commissioner, through the chair, right here is the cross section of the area that's shown on the right from this area right here. So you can see T1 is taken at this area, and then it goes down all the way to T4 here. And so that's what's shown here. So T1 would be here, and the area that Ms. Harris was talking about is this dashed area here. And
So where
yeah,
is south on this schematic? Which direction is south?
I believe that it would just be the bottom would be south.
that's actually north.
I think it's actually this area always can be a little confusing, but the north part of the parcel, essentially, way farther out is the ocean. On the top part of that schematic, and then the Foothill Road
south is at the
area, you
top.
drive out, that's on the south side or on the bottom there. Does that help give some orientation? The site is in a cul-de-sac.
So where's the slope on the diagram, and where's the building envelope? I know from the site it's a big flat area on top, and then it slopes out towards the ocean and also off towards the east. So I'm just want to get oriented. Where's the building envelope and where's the slope?
So the building envelope is shown as this dashed line that goes around like this. And then
Got it.
the slope lines are shown here. So it's relatively flat
Okay.
in this
So-
area, and then gets more steeply sloped as you go out.
So let me tell you what my understanding used to be, and what I was told by Mr. Ramey, is that he intended to build in the building envelope, but he intended to have some drainage structure to some degree in the slope area to deal with drainage from the building envelope. It appears when the slope stability analysis talks about how poor the fill is that's on the slope, that one would need to deal with that drainage. It's even more paramount, let's put it that way, to deal with that. And so having some development there in order to at least deal with drainage seems like something that would be useful, but it's now prohibited by this condition. Am I summarizing things in that simple way that's accurate, or do I have it wrong?
Chair and commissioners, Commissioner Park, I understand the summary there, and I think that is, the drainage was a concern of Mr. Ramey. Because the condition is written with such with the language that says no grading shall occur on the site unless it's within the building envelope, it would be staff's position that any drainage facility that would need to occur on the building envelope.
So if he wanted to do something on the slope to deal with the poor quality of the fill there that's proven by the slope stability analysis, this condition would bar that, wouldn't it?
Chair and Commissioners, it's staff's understanding that that's why the building envelope was put in place. There are unstable slopes on the property. There's environmentally sensitive habitat. And so our understanding is that no development, with the exception of access to the site, would be allowed outside of the building envelope, including grading.
And the ESH, it's not the whole slope. It's shown on the map as being in the southeast corner, right? Near this tributary to Cienegita's Creek.
Commissioner, through the chair, yes, it's on the southern section. It's shown on the on this slope map up here. You can see the outlines of the trees. That's part of the coast live oak woodland, and then further up that's not shown is the Cienegita's Creek with the buffer area.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks. If I have any further questions, I'll raise them later. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Blau.
Yeah, my question is, it's going to not wanting to actually deliberate here, but if you could pull up the map that shows the slope, that shows the grading contours. My question is he asking to put any buildings outside of the building envelope, or is it just the drainage from the site now that we're going to be putting a house and asphalt and impervious materials on the top of the hill?
Chair and Commissioners, if you could just give us one moment, we're going to get the slide up again on the screen.
Great, thanks. There you go. So
Chair and Commissioners, Commissioner Blau, that's correct. So you see the structure is within the building envelope. Where there was concern is the grading associated with the structure, and then I believe there's some elements that are still outside of that envelope. So perhaps it's drainage, and then I don't know if there's any other. It appears that's really the primary issue, but the grading associated with the residents is outside.
Following Commissioner Park's questions, I'm not sure how I get the drainage to go down that hill without some kind of improvements. I mean, if the ground is unstable, and then I'll take what water concentration is going to be there from the house and the other asphalt around the house, where the hell's the water going to go? So the real question is he asking for any structures other than drainage to be outside the building envelope? Maybe that's a question for Mr. Ramey. So I'm interested to hear his comments, and I'll ask him the questions, and I'll probably get the answers I'm looking for.
Okay, well, we'll stay with staff questions right now. Commissioner Bradley, just change your mind? Okay. So it looks like for now we're okay with staff, and we can move on to Mr. Ramey then, who's been waiting patiently.
Okay, thank you very much for having me, and I'll try to make this no longer than necessary to the extent of my ability to do so. I have reviewed the staff report, and I have made comments to the various aspects of it, and I've submitted that document titled Rebuttal to Staff Report for Case Number 19R MM3. And I'm not going to go through this in detail, but I am going to hit a couple highlights. And I think that we'll be able to answer all your questions to your satisfaction. So as far as the biological report, there are a number of anomalies and problems with the report. I won't go into the detail, but the basic conclusion of the report that ESH considerations inhibit development is absolutely wrong. And that's verifiable by reading the biological report itself. And also I brought with me today Mr. Mark de la Garza, who is the author of that report. And so he is available to answer any questions you might have about the staff report, part of the staff report which addresses this issue, and his own report, which conflicts with the staff report. So I will note also that the condition 15, which is really the subject of this hearing, in no way mentions any biological report or whatever. So the biological report was requested. I paid for it. I worked with staff to submit it. But in fact, I don't see that it's relevant in any way to hearing. Other people might disagree, and so there we have it. It's available, and the author is also available to answer any questions you have. So now let's go on to the next piece, which is, I see, consumed a lot of time, but I think that it'll be simpler than first meets the eye. I'm been interested in that slope is kind of a concave slope. Also runs through that slope a ditch, not a drainage dish, but a ditch to carry water, which has been gathered on the roof of the structure, and to direct that water down towards the creek, which is the natural outfall. I've always had the ability to drain it to the other side of the property, the east side of the property. And after consultations with my neighbor, Teichman, I concluded that he was concerned that putting more water in this swale might cause him some issues on his property because the way that things are laid out. And but for me, I have actually no problem of directing it in the other direction. And in order to do that, it requires digging a trench, putting a drain, et cetera, et cetera. I brought I have really two interests in this northeast corner of the property that has this extra steep spot, and that is the fill is loose, as detailed in the slope stability analysis, and there's an easy fix for that. It's done all the time, and it would also round out that slope a little bit to make the landscaping a little more aesthetic and practical, etc. It really has nothing to do with the building itself, and but it would require the remediation of this loose fill would require a grading permit, and the existence of this condition, the way it's phrased, would prohibit those who authorize the grading permit from permitting the remediation that that Mr. Kammer suggests in his report. So this is really an argument that this condition 15 doesn't belong there. And the building department or the planning and development department already has a very effective and well-tested mechanism for handling exactly these kinds of questions. And so to have this condition only things only is going to result in a more negative issue. So to summarize, we would like to remediate that area of the loose fill, and we would like to run the drainage through there. The county grading code does not specifies explicitly that trenches run through the trenches for utilities and drainage and things like that, as long as they're not over a certain amount of yardage of dirt moved, do not qualify as grading. So in fact, there is no obstacle for us to put that to unload the water that accumulates on the flat part of the property down towards the creek. So the only thing we really need is the elimination of condition 15, and then we would be good to go, and it would be approved by the county through the normal grading permit process, and that would be fine. And we don't see any value in the planning commission immersing in itself in this level of minutia. And we have for, and also you people and myself, we have also other things to do, and we're not the best at it. The reports are very technical. I brought as a guest Mr. John Kammer, who is a California certified professional engineer, geotechnical engineer. He is the author of the report, and he is available here to answer any questions you might have. So let's go on to the third section, which is the slope map. The slope map is included as part of the submission we made to to Ms. Brown at the Planning and Development. All the submissions we made, they took some time to prepare, but we tried our best to fulfill their requests and their requirements. We delivered their submissions and reports. They were accepted without reservation. And so the only one that we have left to discuss is the slope map. The only question about the slope map arises in places that are actually graded. Most of the property is not graded, and therefore the issues of the slope, according to the ordinance, are not addressed. One is not required to the ordinance, the grading ordinance, plus the Goleta Valley addendum to it, really addresses how much slope you're going to leave when you're done with the grading. And for now, that the only little bit of grading that our grading plan specifies is a small bit of fill on the western edge of the property. The engineer and that's part of what we submitted. The engineer who specified the final slope, he actually specified the maximum slope, and the real slope we expect is much, much smaller. And also, he wasn't aware that the property was in the Goleta Valley development zone, and that the maximum slope in the county is permitted to be 50%, and the maximum slope in the eastern Goleta Valley area is permitted to be 30%. Had he been aware of that, then he would have specified the maximum slope is 3.33 to 1 rather than the 2 to 1 that he actually specified. So the allegation that we are specifying a grading which results in a slope which is larger than the county permits is false, and it's, I think, due to a little misunderstanding in the writing of the legend on that. So if you have questions about that and the grading plan and also the things like that are somewhat related, like the stormwater removal, I brought along as a guest Mr. Jason Gotsis, who is the principal person here in Santa Barbara for Ashley and Vance, who is also a California certified professional civil engineer. So I think that will be able to give you the information that you need, that you were requesting before. So the staff analysis and recommendations, I'm not going to read them here. I rebutted them, each one of them. They're really based on a total misunderstanding of what we're dealing with here. And of course, I alluded to that before and above. I'm not going to beat that horse to death. So from my perspective, the only real question is, does Decision 15 need to go? Well, it's inhibiting this remediation we want to do. It does nothing that the planning department can't already do through its permit process and everything else. It's overly broad. It really almost wouldn't permit any landscaping on any part of the property. It's ambiguous. The county has a grading ordinance. The Eastern Goleta Valley Community Plan adds some more constraints, and it adds another layer of constraints on top of those two layers, and creating the kind of confusion that has spawned this year and a half of meetings and reports for no good reason. It's been presented, this condition, when it was presented originally, was presented with absolutely no supporting findings. The Planning Commission rules actually specify that any kind of condition should be accompanied by findings, and this was not the case. There were some studies done, but they were included, and in fact, apparently they've been lost to history now. It makes trying to work within that constraint with all its problems adds a lot of unnecessary cost to the project, and as we've seen, a lot of wasted time. So I'm going to urge the planning commissioners to take my application and accept it and vote to eliminate to strike out condition 15 from the development conditions. So I'm ready, and my team is also ready to answer any questions you may have. I hope I didn't take too long.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ramey. Commissioner Park?
Well, I'm trying to make this more simple in my mind, and I appreciate if that last slide would come back up, the slope map.
Well, I think the last slide, well, go ahead, let me see it.
That slope map. And there you go. One of my frustrations with these maps in general.
May I say one thing here? This is not a slope map. No. That's a serious issue. The slope map is submitted as part of the civil plans at the request for a reason which I do not know. They've included the wrong map and called it the slope map. This map, this schematic does not show the slope. It shows the topography, but it doesn't show the slope over different parts of the area. And so this particular thing is absolutely useless to discuss about the issues related to the slope map.
Well, still, I'm going to ask some questions based on it. I don't think it's so useless. Like I was saying, one of my frustrations in looking at these is the directional orientation seems to change almost randomly. And if I understand the project now, north on this map is over to the left,
Exactly.
and south is to the right,
Exactly.
east is to the top, and west is to the bottom, which
Correct.
is different from the slide that was before it.
Yeah, and that's
Whatever.
actually excuse me. Let me explain that 1 second. Actually, the geotechnical engineer worked on his scheme, and the rest of us were working on another one, and we didn't quite. Technically, it's fine, but you're right. One of them is rotated, and it is a little confusing. So go ahead.
Okay, so this is an important question to me because I think folks have been seeing this as a are we accommodating you or not in some way? So it's kind of like you against the county. I'm really oversimplifying, and I'm sorry about that, but that's what I think people are seeing it. Now I am just now in my slow mind discerning a public interest that I'm concerned about that doesn't even involve you, and that is if you build up there and you have buildings and you have rooftop drainage and you have pavement and other flat work and there's drainage off that, and it spills off onto the slope, and you're not allowed to have any drainage structure whatsoever, culverts, collection basins, concrete collection ditches, things that move the drainage over to that Cieneguitas Creek tributary. It would seem to me that the unconsolidated fill that we're worried about on the slope analysis and the water and things, they're going to go downstream, and they're going to go downstream to your neighbors. Do you have neighbors that would now be the recipients of whatever comes off the slope, whether it's mudslides or excessive water and so forth? Can you elaborate on how you're laid out with relation to other property owners?
I can elaborate on that. And we have prepared, it's never been requested, but we do have prepared a stormwater management plan, which is required as part of getting a grading permit and getting the project approval. And it addresses, it's been designed in order to minimize the impact on neighborhood properties. And that's its whole purpose. And we've fulfilled that purpose with this plan. Now, we did have a couple options on doing this. If you look at the bottom of your drawing here, the water comes down the road and it runs along along the bottom edge of the property line, or the western edge of the property, and then it keeps going onto a neighbor's property. And this is going back, I don't know, 100 years or whatever. And then it eventually works its way around. And you can see the topography is sort of like a little hill. Eventually works its way around and down into Cieniguitas Creek. And we could do that. I think that, but as I say, in order to address the concerns of my neighbor who lives beyond the western edge of the property, it was easy for me. Oh, and by the way, there's another neighbor down here on the southern end of the property who also expressed concern about this building perhaps generating more water going down. Now, the edge, Cieniguitas Creek, is just beyond the upper right-hand corner of your map here, or a little bit beyond that. So my view was, and the Ashley & Vance engineers concurred with me, that a good way to do this, or a better way than the way that all the other houses have been done, would be to capture the water and run and heat. And they've drawn this little on your map. They've drawn this little drainage thing and a little box that collects its stuff down there and then sends it on. And this eventually would go along and head towards the upper right-hand corner here, and that's right into Cieniguitas Creek. So the actual destination of any water collected off the roof of this structure doesn't change from the other way that we might have considered doing it, but it does keep that water off of neighbors' properties. And that's something which I think that, I hope that the neighbors appreciate. And it is a little bit more expensive, but it's not so much that it's not worth doing. So in order to do this, unfortunately, as you mentioned, the upper left corner of this map, that the fill in that area, I can see where it's kind of a concave area that has some loose fill, and really would not be a bad idea to remediate regardless. Condition 15 would prohibit us from doing that, but in fact it would be a good thing to do.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Bridley.
No. Well, actually, I had questions for Mr. Ramey's consultant team, if they're there.
Excuse me, are you talking to me?
For your consultants, if Mr. Gotsis is there?
I am.
Thank you, Mr. Gotsis. So you didn't actually create the slope map, right? But did you look at the drainage improvements necessary for this footprint that Mr. Ramey is proposing?
Yes, we did.
So what, I guess it's not a land use permit appeal for the house, but we're getting there. Explain to me how the drainage functions on this kind of a site plan, so close to the creek. If we know that the creek really isn't a place where the county building department's going to want to have drainage infrastructure.
So right now, this is a preliminary grading and drainage plan. So the main point is to show that we're going to control drainage without having it run down the existing slope. So we do that with that one catch basin and point of discharge off to the east or the top of the map. Or the top of the drawing, or convey it to there's an existing drainage swale along the westerly property. So those would be the two main points of draining it, so it would not run down that existing slope.
So you've got a catch basin halfway down the slope into Cieniguitas Creek. Am I reading that correctly?
No, that's the discharge point with just a placeholder for riprap, so we could mitigate any erosion, fan out the drainage onto that benched area that's kind of above the way the creek is. There's another drop down to the flow line beyond that.
Okay, and then the other solution is along on this exhibit, the left side of the structure as it sits, which would actually be the kind of the southwest, right?
That's the west. The north runs to the left.
Okay.
So it would that's that swale you can make out along the westerly side is draining due south.
Okay.
So just to reiterate, because I know
You know what? I'm sorry, Mr. Ramey. I really want to have conversations with Mr. Gotsis because we've heard your points a couple times. So, and then the second thing, Mr. Gotsis, is what about structural footings for this structure? I'm not even clear because I couldn't look at the plans in detail. What is the element that's along the creek? Is that the dark shaded element?
Along the creek.
It's like separated from the structure. Is it a walkway or what is that?
Oh, is it, you mean to the right side of it?
Yeah.
Those dark rectangles, those are paver walking stones,
Okay.
paving path.
So your grading and your structural support would look like what is holding this structure in place with that loose fill that's
the structure.
I mean, the loose fill is underneath this structure. If I took the cross section of the slope stability figure and put it underneath here, right?
So we haven't got into the structural design of this yet. I don't think a structural engineer, as far as I know, has not been brought on to look at it. But yeah, whether it's, I probably would defer to Mr. Cammers as far as if there has been any foundation investigation done yet.
Okay.
But yeah, that would just be addressed, whether traditional spread footing or a grading caisson.
We do have a soils report that makes suggestions about the foundation. No one's had a need for it yet, but we have that in our collection.
It will be needed. Is Mr. Cammer available then? I'm going to pick up with where Mr. Gotsis left off.
Yes, John Cammer is here.
Thank you, Mr. Cammer. So getting to my question is, I think we've had a couple points of information and the cross section, you were responsible for the figure that had the slope analysis and the cross section figure, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So that tells me that the area that is loose fill is actually under a section of the structure. So what is the solution for this thing? Where he wants it?
I want to clarify something. I am an engineering geologist, not a civil engineer. That's a very important point there.
Okay.
So I am not the person who created the soils engineering report for the foundation design. But it's a shallow slope failure. It can be mitigated with caissons or grading as its basic grading concepts during site development.
Okay, and so do you have any opinion about what has caused this fill? I mean, is this just the soil, the underlying soil related to the creek and where it is, or has this been cut out by the creek, or is this loose fill that was imported from some other, I mean, can you tell?
Yeah, so I found bottles and cans in the fill, so it's just been pushed off, and who knows, they were fairly old material judging by the characteristics of the detritus, the trash that was in the fill. That's why I label it fill. There was a couple different types of fill, judging from the components within the fill. That's why I had the fill 1, fill 2, and then the colluvium, which is a surface soil.
Okay. All right, that helps a lot with questions. I don't have any other questions at this time.
Thank you. Commissioner Blau?
Yeah, this is getting real easy for me. It looks to me like condition 15 is kind of a standard condition when we have building envelopes and properties with slope. And I don't think at the time that condition was created that there was any consideration given to the drainage issues going from the flat area down to the creek. I'm not interested in sitting here today to tell you the truth and learning how to be a geologist or an engineer. I think the problem here is that when this project was approved, we got kind of a standard condition and no one thought through what it was going to do to take the water from the top of this hill to the bottom of the creek. What Mr. Ramey is asking to do is to allow him to hire his professional engineers and other people to properly transport the water down to the creek. I got no problem with it. And I understand why staff said no. I think that the planning staff does not have the ability to approve this project, given the way the condition is written. That's why Mr. Ramey is here, is to get the condition, which was inappropriately put on the property, removed. I think if there was, I mean, it's like if the condition had read, it's okay for fences and access and drainage facilities, he wouldn't have a problem. He wouldn't be here today. So I'm curious to hear from any of his engineers or his other support people if I'm wrong about that.
Are we in deliberations now?
But that was a question.
Okay.
The question was, is there any reason that this, from his professional engineers, that condition should have been there or should have been allowed to have an exception for drainage so it can be properly built? I mean, I'm a builder and I build this kind of stuff, but I don't build, I hire engineering contractors to put those kind of facilities in for me. And so I'm asking his engineers, is what he's asking for reasonable and ordinary? And we're just asking to modify the condition to allow him to do it correctly.
So Mr. Ramey, do you have one of your engineers there that can answer Commissioner Blau's question?
Well, I think.
No, he wants, Mr. Ramey, he wants one of the engineers.
I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Somebody licensed by the state of California.
Okay, I'm sorry. I got confused. I thought you wanted me to designate which one.
Do you have one?
Well, I think the appropriate person is Mr. Kammer, who is the one who made the slope stability analysis and has also recommended the remediation. And I think from the
Okay, so is Mr. Kammer available, Mr. Ramey?
This is John Kammer. I'm here.
Okay, can you answer Commissioner Blau's question?
Yes, I see no problems at all with the reasonable ordinary grading practices to allow that drainage to go down the hillside as it shows on the map.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Blau, did you have a follow-up to that?
No, that answers it. I mean, basically what you have is, you just heard the engineer, that's the proper way to build it. The problem we have is the planning department has this condition that doesn't allow any grading to occur on the slope. It needs to occur. That's the problem.
Okay.
It should have read, you could go on the slope for driveways, for fences, and for necessary drainage devices. It's just missing a sentence.
Okay. Commissioner Bradley?
Are we in deliberations yet, or is everyone done with their questions? I don't know. Because we can go right to.
No, we're not in deliberations yet. Okay.
Okay, I have no further questions then. I'd like to address Mr. Blau's, Commissioner Blau's comments when we were there.
Okay, very good. Okay, Mr. Villalobos, do we have any public comment?
Mr. Chair, we do, in fact.
Very good. Why don't we go to public comment now?
Our first public speaker is Erwin Teichman. I see you have 2 logins, Mr. Teichman. If you are on using your phone for audio, you might have to hit *6. Can you hear us, sir?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead whenever you're ready. I think you muted yourself again. And for the Planning Commission.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Yeah, I appreciate Mr. Ramey's concern about a negative water flow on the eastern side of this property. I am the neighbor on the western side of the property. I'm more concerned about water flow towards my property. Mitigation on the eastern slope may help my property in that case, I'm in favor of this project, of him expanding his footprint. However, I don't see so far how its water flow towards my property will be mitigated from what he's planning to do with the, I guess I'm not following all of the engineering, but from the construction he wants to do on the eastern side of the property. So what happens is water flows through down towards my property. Even though it's supposed to go towards the creek, Singitas Creek, it tends to flow towards my property, which is on the western slope. Now, stuff going off the top of his house, which he's addressed, yes, that will go towards the eastern side, towards where it's very steep. It's not quite as steep towards my property. However, water flows generally, and I had a bunch of photographs I sent to Mr. Villalobos, but unfortunately, it was a PowerPoint presentation that he could not open. So I would have, at this point, shown you some pictures of how the water flow approaches my property, which is on the bottom corner of this drawing that you have up right now. I am concerned about the water flow towards that direction. Water flow is supposed to go towards the creek. However, it seems to be taking a roundabout way because Mr. Ramey put in a turnaround, which is the area to the left of the building site. And together with the turnaround and we have a long lane, which the turnaround connects to towards the left, all of that water flows from the lane and from his turnaround and from his property towards my property, which is on the west side of this configuration. I'm concerned about water flow towards my home. I would approve his plan to mitigate drainage if he also addressed drainage towards my property on the west side. He claims I shouldn't worry. I've had an engineer look at it and said there are some concerns about a worry, and especially to the left of the turnaround zone where you see sort of a topographic downflow towards the turnaround zone. Anyway, I got a late notice about this and I haven't really adequately prepared. So I'm just saying that I would be in favor of him mitigating drainage on this property, especially if he's allowed to push this property somewhat away from my home, because as there is a drainage area that's only about 10 feet wide, well, including the setback, it's probably 20 feet wide, but it's only 10 feet wide by my home, coming down the lane from his property, from the turnaround. All of that goes right through in front of my property. I was so worried about this, I just put in a whole new cement driveway with a larger speed bump, with a larger slope away from my property, because I have pictures showing that the water accumulates toward my home on the west. And he doesn't seem to be concerned about that. He's only concerned about adding something up on the eastern side. And any discussion with him doesn't seem to go anywhere. I wanted to put in fact, I have drawings that I also have in the PowerPoint presentation of a wall that I wanted to put in that I was hoping he would cooperate with to keep water from flowing into my property. Right now, I just couldn't wait any longer to find out whether he was going to help me with this. So I just completed a 3,500 square foot cement driveway at quite a cost and changed the slope away from my front door. That's how concerned I was about this water flow. So anyway, not to elaborate anymore, without my pictures, it doesn't hold water as well. But I wish he were addressing water flow towards the west side. And in order to do that, his revised home plan pushed the whole property towards my home and allowing a green area right in front of his home. So he has a nice open green area. However, together with the planting that he has in store for me, and in terms of the building being about close to 15 feet in height right in front of my front door, my view is getting blocked. The horticulture he's planting can grow to excess of 15 to 20 feet. That's going to also block my view. Then he's pushing the house towards the drainage that is the only drainage we have towards Cienfuegos Creek. So anyway, long and the short, it'd be nice if that were addressed as well. And I'm sorry I don't have my pictures. The PowerPoint is not opening according to Mr. Villalobos.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Teichman.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Villalobos, are there any more public speakers?
Mr. Chair, not for this item, no.
Not for this item. Okay. All right, very good. So we can go back to the applicant. Did you have any rebuttal testimony, Mr. Rainey?
Well, I just have really one short comment. I think that there was on looking at this map, there was a little bit of confusion. On the upper left-hand corner of this map where this drainage little gizmo is, this is the area which was the subject of the slope stability analysis. And somebody asked a question which suggested to me that they were thinking that this area, which is subject to the slope stability analysis, was under the structure, or some structure was built on top of that. As you can see by looking at this map, the upper left-hand corner is not developed. It's just a slope, and that's pretty much all there. There's nothing anticipated building on it. I would like to do some landscaping on that, but other than that, it doesn't interact with any other development aspect of the property. The building itself is built on rock solid clay soil and filled with boulders. And if anybody's interested, we can provide the soils report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rainey. Does staff have anything they'd like to add?
Thank you, commissioners. I think staff would just like to reiterate that the decision we made recommending denial was based on a number of issues, but the building envelope was put in by the commission, the building envelope condition of approval, and it was put in place to ensure that any project that would go on this property would meet certain policies from the community plan, and that includes development on slopes over 20%, and that includes compliance with ESH policies. The bio report that the applicant submitted confirmed that there were ESH on this property, and so that is the foundation for staff's decision. There is proposals for more work than just drainage. It looks like there's some structural parts of the proposed project that would go into the envelope, some grading, and so it is not simply just a drainage issue, and I think staff would just like to call those things out. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, any further questions? Commissioner Bradley? Please unmute.
Nothing. I'm just ready to go to deliberations.
Okay. All right. Well, then let's go ahead. Oh, Commissioner Park.
I have a couple of questions of staff, but I have a question of you first, Chair Farini. Is it possible we could take a little biological break before we go further?
That's fine. Would 10 minutes work, Commissioner Park?
It would.
Okay, let's take a 10-minute break then.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Okay, it looks like we're back online here. Commissioner Park, did you have something?
Mr. Chair, we're back on the air whenever you're ready to start again.
Yes, I do. And I have three focused questions that I think will help actually speed up deliberations. If we get on the same page on factual understanding. The first two questions are for staff. The third one might be for county council. If we could pull up the slope map again. Okay, on the slope map is a diagonal line that starts at the center bottom and it trends to the right, the center of the right edge of the map. I hope that staff, you can understand which line I'm referring to. And is that not in fact the cross-section line for the cross-section on the slope stability analysis? Isn't that the same line?
Commissioner, through the chair, this slide is actually oriented different than the other one. It just came straight out of the report, but the cross-section was actually in this area. The line isn't shown on this map. It was in the other report.
Okay, all right. If, regardless of what we do with condition 15, if Mr. Well, if anyone, any property owner that owns the property comes in with plans for actual building and associated improvements, it will have to receive other permits, including permits from the building department. At that time, there will be an analysis of what's an appropriate foundation, what's appropriate drainage, all those things that get analyzed. Isn't that correct?
Chair, Commissioners, that's correct. And then the ESH and ESH buffer would also be looked at that time.
Right. So if we were to approve this project today, approve this modification of 15, or even if we didn't, we're not being asked to approve the house plans or whether there's caissons or raised footings or whatever for the foundation. That's not before us today, right?
Chair and Commissioners, that's correct. So if you wanted to approve the recorded map modification, then today we would be discussing findings for approval. But the land use permit for the structure and development is a separate action under the director.
Right. So I'm not going to worry about whether there's caissons and whatnot. I think they're all very good questions, but I don't want to address that today. But my last question is, as I understand it, this project is to delete 15, condition 15. What I want to know is, do we have the discretion today to modify condition number 15, not to delete it, but to do something just as Commissioner Blau suggested and add the words "in any necessary or appropriate drainage improvements," something like that? And if we did have that, then I might be interested in actually continuing this matter with instructions to staff to prepare something. But I want to know if that's within our discretion for this requested action.
Chair and Commissioners, Commissioner Park, yes, that's correct. Our understanding is that you could modify the condition, again, just making the appropriate findings. The request that staff received was to remove the condition entirely. And so, perhaps the applicant should weigh in on whether they would be amenable to a modification as well.
Well, I think that's a good point, but I think more important is whether my fellow planning commissioners are amenable to anything like that, and that's where we get into deliberations. But at least this is not a binary thing where either we leave it exactly as it is or we delete it. We could in fact modify it. And thank you for your answer to that question. And so I'm done with my questions for now. Thank you, Chairman Farini.
Okay, thank you. Now let's move on to deliberations, and Chair Bradley is going to start us off. Or not Chair, past Chair Bradley, who's muted. There you go.
Commissioner Bradley. Okay, so I'm going to follow the pattern, which is, and I have a sense of where everybody is, but I have I do have concerns about actually dropping the condition entirely. I wasn't on the planning commission when this was adopted. I understand in talking to Cecilia Brown when I got on the commission that sometimes when parcel maps come in, the applicant doesn't do the full engineering analysis like what has had to happen now when someone is looking for a land use permit. And so sometimes the commission has to have more general conditions, understanding that future. So I am really interested in how the rest of the commission is looking at this, because right now I am not convinced to go against staff's recommendation, but I'd really like to hear everyone's issue, because frankly, another solution is if you had a slightly different site plan and a smaller house that isn't right up against that kind of a slope. And I think of the kinds of properties I've been on Mission Canyon and along, 192 and things that were all taken out by the debris flow. And that kind of makes me nervous, even with a bunch of engineering to try to stabilize it. So let me hear what you all have to say, please.
Commissioner Blau.
Yeah, I'm not hearing any requests for him to build any structures outside of the original building envelope. And even if where my next question would be, how much are you encroaching in a foot? But from what I see for this map and for what staff has presented, that's not the issue here. The issue here is really just one of drainage. So I'm agreeing with Commissioner Park to just simply modify the condition to allow him to do the drainage devices he needs. And maybe even modified a little more was to say that if he disturbs any of the ESHA or he has to revegetate it, rebuild it, replace it so that it's there. And I get it. I mean, to put a channel in there with even a pipe or a rock or riprap would not be a common concern about the water flowing in his property. As a civil matter, you're not allowed to modify drainage or increase the drainage on your neighbor's property. It has to go the historical flow. So I would hope that Mr. Ramey would be very careful in making sure that that does not occur on Mr. Tishman's property. But I'm also very confident that the building department, through their plan check process, will ensure that the grading is designed such that it doesn't occur. But I'm prepared to make that modification.
Commissioner Cooney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I feel differently, I think, than the rest of the commission. I, from the beginning, have had a negative reaction to input from the applicant, who has minimized entirely the work he intends to do and not addressed other than to just deny that the staff report has any, and previous staff reports have any value to them. As a member of the commission for a long time, I can think of very few, less than 2 or 3 situations where we have added the condition at question here of limiting development to the development envelope, where someone's come in and asked to have it removed. I don't have a good feeling that this applicant is simply trying to solve a drainage problem. I think he has lots of plans for the property, and this condition 15's been in his way. So until we see a project application that addresses a modified condition 15, which is very narrow and talks about specific drainage areas that have to be approved by the appropriate county departments, I'm going to vote against any removal of condition 15.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Cooney. Well, I think that paves the way for coming up with the modifications to 15 that I believe Commissioner Park was talking about. Commissioner Park, your hand's still up. Are you
Well, I raised my hand, so yeah, I would.
Okay,
I would like to
very
speak.
good.
Just to add in, I'm not going to support modifications to condition 15. I would actually make, in fact, I'll just do it now. I'll make a motion to support staff's recommendation and deny the request to remove condition 15. That'll be my motion for now to get the moving discussion along.
Okay, Commissioner Cooney.
I'll second the motion, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Park.
Yeah, I can't support that motion. I wouldn't support that motion, and I wouldn't support a motion to delete it. I think that condition 15 serves an important purpose, and it is a standard condition, and it should be. And it's kind of an obvious purpose. If you have a building envelope, well, then we're not going to allow development outside of it. That being said, there are practical reasons to have some development outside of it. I would actually be concerned, were I county council, that a younger version of me that was more creative and energetic might argue that if you have a building envelope where you allow construction, but as a practical matter, you deny any way to drain it or otherwise, you are in a sense removing a reasonable development of the lot, and that's inverse condemnation. And whether that's a good argument or not, it's a practical point here that to reasonably develop this site will take some drainage and some things. So no, I don't want to delete 15 in its entirety. I think that would be overkill. I think that we can't anything at all occur in that non-building up area is also unreasonable. And one thing that illustrates a driveway to have in there, but it doesn't allow drainage improvements that would benefit the whole neighborhood, including the Tishmans to the west and others. So I think we should modify number 15. And I don't know the procedure for that. I can see the point that if we had a better idea of what the applicant was really going to do, then it would be easier to have a more precise modification of condition 15. On the other hand, you know, we can't micromanage everything, and it's going to be up to the applicant to bring specific plans and the building department to get into it on all those things. Maybe that's the time to modify condition 15. Maybe now is. I don't really know, but I'm ready to modify it today if we can have the appropriate language. So that's where I'm coming from. I will not vote for the motion as made, and I also won't vote to delete it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll just make a couple comments. It doesn't seem to me that putting in drainage is really development. I see, you know, or building. I don't see that as building. I see it as just an accessory that's necessary, you know, for the safety of the community. I have this magic desk, and it seems that these items pop up here, and the one that came up is the accessory dwelling unit handbook that we got in December of 2020. And it says California's housing production is not keeping pace with demand. In the last decade, less than half the homes needed to keep up with the population growth were built. So that kind of stuck with me. We're built, right? And we have an applicant here who wants to build a home. I'd like us to find a way to get that done. He's been at it a while. I kind of agree with all the commissioners, and I think we're close to an agreement. We want to keep 15, and I think we all want to see a project. So with that, Commissioner Blau, your hand's back up, I think.
Yeah, I think this is a really easy one. I don't think this needs to be continued in order to make the change. I think we would just like to trail this to after the Maldonado hearing and just have staff modify the language such that they can put in the drainage devices as approved by the building department. And if you want some other language in there that talks about repairing the ESHA or any damage that occurs as a result of that, I'm good with that too. But I think it's a really pretty easy thing. I would like to hear from Mr. Ramey before we vote on the motion to see if that's going to work for him.
Can I interject
But-
something here? Okay, I guess not. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, we have a motion and a second to deny the appeal, correct, Commissioner Briley?
Correct.
Okay, and so I think
Chair and
we
Commissioners,
should,
just for clarification.
To deny the recorded map modification. Thank you, Ms. Harris, for that clarification.
Yes, so
And
time to vote. Yep.
yeah, so I think we'll vote on that and see how that goes.
Commissioner Cooney. Aye.
aye.
Commissioner Park.
No.
Commissioner Blau.
No.
Chair Farini.
No,
Motion fails 2-3.
So if you don't mind, I'll go ahead and make the motion to modify condition 15 such that to allow for drainage devices to be installed in the area and to repair any damage to the ESHA as a result of it.
and Mr. Wilson,
Yeah, so I understand the desire again to get this done today. However, we need to actually continue this. There aren't findings for approval on this. And I think as Deputy Director Seawards indicated, there's other items that need to be considered other than this drainage in regards to ash and slope. So my suggestion recommendation is we actually need to continue this and provide direction to staff to come back with findings for approval and the exact wording on the modified conditions number 15. And we also need to evaluate that if the modification can still be found consistent with the policies that are at play as well. So that's my recommendation, because we also need CEQA findings. So we don't, the Planning Commission doesn't have the necessary information today to make findings for approval or a modification today.
So how long do you need to make those changes, do you think, Mr. Wilson?
Commissioner Blau, through the chair, I look to Deputy Director Seawards and his staff. I think we're looking at a June 2nd date in order to meet the requirements for that.
Great, then I'll change my motion to go do a continuation for June the 2nd. With instructions to come back with findings for approval.
okay.
And can I just,
Commissioner Briley,
can I just add on one thing before we leave the topic? Because I'm anxious to do that too, is I want us to think about how these things are put on maps. And even if this is a parcel map, it could actually affect things like the Orchid Golf Course or, Quayside 3 and 21, right? So when there are conditions on those maps, like you can't build outside of the envelope and we could do the best we can without all the technical reports for constructing, we're relying that building envelope is going to stay, just as the Planning Commission did with this case. It kind of goes back to what Commissioner Cooney says. So I have no personal issue about losing the vote on this. I'm really concerned about the precedent it sets for what does the value of a recorded map condition mean? And we have seen cases where that comes up in the 1st district, the 2nd district. I know we're going to see them. I'm going to see them personally in all the other districts. So just to make that one last pitch or consideration before we come back with the revised findings and a motion that isn't probably something I can support.
Well,
maybe we'll see.
Let me just respond to that. It's just like the condition allows for roadways, it allows for fencing, it didn't allow for drainage, and I think that was a mistake when that condition was placed on there to begin with. And I'm really adamant when I try and read the conditions of approval very carefully, because I don't want conditions in there that cause these kind of problems. And I think if we were to look at going forward, if I see another track map with a condition like this and it doesn't allow for drainage and we have issues with slope, I'm going to probably insist that that be included in the condition of approval, that you allow for slope. What I don't want is I don't want Mr. Ramey building that property and just let the water run down the slope and create ditches and adversely affect other people's property. I want the county department to have the ability to have him properly design the drainage devices so they don't adversely affect the neighbors or don't adversely affect the creek. And that's what I'm getting at. So it's not like we're giving him something he wasn't supposed to have. We just didn't do it right the first time.
And he maximized his building envelope out to the very edge of the building envelope. Let's not ignore that factor.
I get that, but that doesn't have an effect on it. Whether he had a small building envelope or a big building envelope, the water has to go to the creek. It can't stay on top of the hill. So let's get it in the creek the right way. That's what he's saying. And I'm not seeing, the staff didn't tell me that he's building the building outside of the building envelope. It's just that the fact you can't grade the hill and put in a pipe or riprap or ordinance for the drainage. So my motion stands to continue to the second with staff to come back with those conditions.
And Chair.
Commissioner Cooney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a comment, we're commenting on the motion to continue, but behind the motion to continue is to modify condition 15. And I think that's something that we will very carefully consider when it comes back. But Commissioner Blau, I think you're oversimplifying to say that it didn't provide for drainage. There is drainage. There's been testimony today that the drainage goes down the hill, winds around, and goes into the creek. But maybe Mr. Ramey wants to do it a different way. Maybe that's not the best way. So it's not a simple question of allowing him to grade, period. I think we're asking to be like another department of the county, maybe the Board of Architectural Review. We're getting into these kinds of details and redoing the project. So it's not an easy job we're giving to staff to come up with a modified condition that can't be simply take out grading and allow him to do whatever he wants. Thank you.
Commissioner Park.
Well, you know, it's kind of fun here in that I think it sounds like my colleagues don't agree with each other, but I agree with all of them. How can that be? But I think Commissioner Briley is absolutely right. We want to honor building envelopes. We don't want to dispose of that concept. But I also think that Commissioner Blau is correct that, you know, standard conditions evolve, and maybe it's time that this evolve, that this isn't really just about building envelopes, it's about a standard condition, and it ought to evolve to have something more than just driveways. And here some necessary and appropriate drainage improvements are valuable. We're thinking about Mr. Ramey and how close he gets to the building envelope and how big a house he builds. I don't know if he's going to get approved an 800 square foot one. Think about and the other neighbors from my urban interrupt drainage patterns, and things have to go somewhere, whether it's water or debris and things. And so this helps in that regard. And I do agree with Commissioner Cooney that it's not really a simple question. It will take a continuance so staff can properly tee this up and prepare it in the right way. And I think this is all about some kind of appropriate modification of condition 15 for this matter. And if that's what the motion is for instructions to prepare findings and other things for the modification of condition 15, then I'm all for the motion. And I can't remember, did anybody second it? If they haven't, I will.
It has not been seconded.
He just did.
If the motion has been made, I second it.
Okay.
I got to make one last comment, being a guy that deals with this, you know, on a regular basis. This whole issue of drainage has been a kind of an evolving issue. And over the past 2 or 3 years, it's changed drastically. You now have the Clean Water Act. You no longer can you just have a gutter around your house and let it dump out under the concrete and flow down the hill. You can't do that anymore. You've got certain things you have to do to retain it, to recharge part of it, and it's just gotten a lot more complicated. Just so it's not something that I don't think we want to try and wrestle with. We're not experts at it, but understand that we've got people like Kathleen and other people in our different departments that deal with that now, and they will do it right. But you have to do it right anymore.
Chair Farini.
Commissioner Bradley?
Sorry.
Oh, I don't have anything more to add.
Okay, all right.
Chair Farini.
Yes.
Hi,
Staff.
this is Deputy Director Seawards. Before you make the vote, we would just request as staff, if you are going to vote to have us come back for findings of approval, we do need some direction from the commission. For example, the very first finding talks about what are the circumstances that have changed since the condition was made to warrant this change in the condition that the applicant's requesting. And also we would need some direction from the commission on how a change in the condition of approval would still ensure that it meets the policies requirements. So that would just be very helpful for staff.
Thank you. Commissioner Blau?
Well, what are the policies that we're not meeting that you're talking about?
Chair and Commissioners, there are policies regarding development on slopes. So there are some geo policies and then environmentally sensitive habitat policies as well that require that projects not be built in ESH. And then if there's a buffer, there are policies in place about buffer reductions.
So you're allowing driveways and accesses and fencing. So why is this different than that?
The entire point, the entire point of the building envelopes, to refer to Commissioner Bradley's, was that the project would be scoped in a way that all of the policy issues would be contained within that envelope. And so now if we allow, because again, like I said before, the basic schematics that we have, there's structural stuff that looks like they're proposing outside of the envelope. So we do need direction on the findings.
Well, what's structural? I didn't see that. I thought that you told me when you put the maps up there that all the structure was within the approved building envelope. That the only thing that was not in there is the drainage devices. Did I get that wrong?
No, I'm sorry. I said grading. Okay, so we're looking at grading. We're looking at landscaping, flat work. There looks like there may be some structure, but we're not sure what they're proposing because, again, we don't have detailed plans yet. So there is more to this than just simply modifying the condition. We need more direction from you.
Well,
and remember, Commissioner Blau, that we heard from the geotech engineer that it's probably going to require caissons to support that site plan. So maybe, I mean, this is funny because I'm not even voting for your motion in favor, but if you want to modify, other than drainage, have it also include grading, maybe that's the direction they're looking for.
I'm just looking for drainage. If he is building a building outside of the approved building envelope, that's a entirely different question. I didn't hear him ask for that modification, and I probably wouldn't approve that modification because I haven't seen the evidence that it's required. I'd be more inclined to agree with you that he could shrink the size of the building a little bit. But I didn't hear that. I didn't hear it is what he's asking for is just limiting condition 15, which talks about limiting his work to fencing and driveways. And I'm agreeing with Commissioner Park that I want to include that he can put drainage devices in there. If he does do any grading as a result of the drainage devices, he would need to repair the area so that the ESHA remains intact. That would have been my direction to staff, and I don't see how that violates the policy that we're talking about. Again, I'm not saying that we increase the size of the building envelope because that was not Mr. Ramey's request. Now, I would look at that if he asked for it, but I don't hear him asking for that. So I don't know if that gives staff the direction or not. I'd like to hear from staff again if that would work.
I think what staff is hearing is that you would like the findings for approval limited to only allow work related to drainage, period. Anything else not related to drainage, you would not be supportive of.
So far, that's correct. I have not heard any evidence that he's requesting anything other than that. Again, I mean, if he comes back and says at the later hearing, he wants to encroach or go outside of the building envelope, that's a different question. I might tend to agree with Commissioner Brightly, thank you. I'll get it someday, so help me.
We'll stay on you.
Yeah, there you go. So that's it.
Mr. Chair, could I suggest something that might help staff with the finding number 1, the changes in circumstances? And again, this is crazy because I may not even support the motion, but wanting to get this forward, would the fact that we do have, as Commissioner Blau and Commissioner, everyone has recognized, we have new legislation requiring the SWIPs and on-site drainage plans, even for single-family homes. Would new legislation addressing on-site drainage requirements, would that be a changing condition as far as staff is concerned?
I can answer that for you. The county, you're required to do it. That's not a condition of this map. It's a condition of every property in the county now.
I know, but it wasn't a condition when the parcel map was approved. Those I'm very well aware of those legislative efforts. I get permits for them with engineers, frequently. So my question is, a legislative evolution that has required more aggressive site design standards for construction, is that considered a change in circumstances for the purpose of that finding?
Interesting.
I'm just trying to get.
Sure.
I can see why staff is struggling with that one finding. So,
yeah. Commissioner Bradley, we'll try that. Thank you for that example. I think it's helpful. Yep.
Very good. Commissioner Park, your hand's back up.
Yes. I don't think we can spend all day, especially with other project in front of us, designing findings. I think that it's Planning Commission role to be general in our direction, and we aren't professionals at doing what staff does very well, and it's staff's job to take those general directions and do the very best it can, and I think we're kind of at that point. I would add to Commissioner Bridley's very welcome effort to rationalize this, that we've also had a slope stability analysis that shows that there's some real problems with fill, and that drainage improvements would be appropriate. And that's a change in circumstances. So I'm convinced that staff will do its best and can do a good job, and we should move forward and see what happens on that continued date.
Thank you, Commissioner Park. Commissioner Bradley, hand still up?
No.
You okay? All right. Okay. Let's go with that and say we have enough and move on to the vote, please, Mr. Villalobos.
Just one moment, Mr. Chair.
Could you clarify, Chair, what date you're moving it to? Is it
June 2nd?
June 2nd. Okay. The June 2nd timeline is extremely tight for staff. We have to draft the new findings and run them through our docket system. So we're just discussing if that timeline works for us. If you could just give us 1 minute. Okay. We'll try and make June 2nd work. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, shall I proceed with the vote?
Yes, please.
All right, great. Commissioner Cooney,
No.
Commissioner Bradley,
No,
Commissioner Park,
Aye.
Commissioner Blau,
Aye.
Chair Farini.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-2.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Villalobos. All right, let's, it's 20-12. We can read this final item in to the record, and then